The day I discovered the betrayal started just like any other. Breakfast with Emily, our 3-year dating routine, the sweet messages, but something felt off in the air. Small details I used to ignore began coming together like pieces of a sinister puzzle. The phone she never put down, the frequent trips out of the office with Brandon, my boss, for important meetings, the different perfume I sometimes caught on her clothes. It was then I noticed that Emily was more distant, avoiding eye contact during our conversations. Her smiles felt empty, mechanical. The nights we used to spend together were replaced by mysterious overtime. Tyler and Sophia, our closest friends, behaved oddly whenever I mentioned these changes. Something was wrong, really wrong, and I was about to uncover a truth that would change my life forever. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. That night, I decided to get to the office earlier. Emily had said she needed to work late again, something about an urgent project with Brandon. The building was almost empty, just a few lights on in the executive floor. I quietly headed upstairs, thinking about surprising her, maybe even inviting her to dinner. The elevator doors opened, and my heart stopped. Through the glass walls of Brandon's office, I saw Emily in his arms. It wasn't some professional hug, not innocent at all. I was frozen, watching a scene that was shattering 3 years of relationship in seconds. My first reaction was surprisingly calm, even to myself. I got back into the elevator without making a sound. On the way down, my mind was processing thousands of details. The frequent meetings, the hidden messages, the knowing smiles they exchanged during company events. Everything made sense now. Instead of confronting them right away, I decided to watch and wait. In the following days, I stuck to my regular routine, paying attention to every little detail. Emily continued acting as if nothing was going on, but now I could clearly see her lies. Brandon, my boss, treated me with fake friendliness, delivering over-the-top compliments about my work. The worst part was realizing that Tyler and Sophia, friends I considered close, knew everything. They'd give me sympathetic looks when they thought I wasn't watching, whispered conversations stopping whenever I passed by. They were silent accomplices in this betrayal, and it hurt just as much as the infidelity itself. I couldn't keep living with Emily after what I saw. Without making a fuss, I gathered some clothes and personal items while she was at work. I found a small motel nearby, run by Mr. Harrison, a friendly man who noticed my tough situation and offered me a special rate. The room was simple, but clean and quiet, a perfect place to sort out my thoughts and plan my next steps. It was during this time of isolation that I started getting strange messages from acquaintances, distant friends asking if I was okay, if I needed help. At first, I didn't understand why they were so concerned. Then Ashley, a coworker, discreetly approached me during lunch. Carefully, she showed me the messages Emily was spreading. According to her, I had issues with drinking, was controlling, even violent. A completely fabricated story meant to slander me and justify her own actions. Mr. Harrison became an unexpected confidant. During our late-night chats at the motel reception, he shared his life wisdom, advising me not to act impulsively. Sometimes silence is your best defense, he'd say, serving up a strong coffee that became our daily ritual. The isolation at the motel let me see the whole picture. Emily wasn't just cheating on me. She was building a narrative where she was the victim and I was the villain. People at the office started treating me differently. Some even avoided direct contact. Brandon, on the other hand, kept his false concern, asking if I was okay and offering help I never asked for. The worst was seeing how Tyler and Sophia fueled these lies. They, who knew our history and had been part of so many important moments, were now helping destroy my reputation. On social media, they liked and shared the indirect posts Emily made, giving extra weight to her false stories. But I kept my cool. Every lie spread, every judgmental look, every fake show of concern, it was all being documented. Mr. Harrison was right. My silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. It was on one of those nights at the motel that Madison, an old friend of Emily's, reached out to me. She was visibly nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder as we talked in the small cafe next door. What she revealed completely changed my perspective on the whole situation. Madison said that this wasn't an isolated case. Emily and Brandon had a history of manipulating and ruining reputations. Nathan, my predecessor at the company, had gone through something similar. He was competent, respected, until he started dating Emily. The pattern was identical. She'd get close to promising employees, start a relationship, and when she got bored, she ruined their reputations with Brandon's help. Nathan ended up leaving town after his career was ruined by false accusations. Madison kept in touch with him and shared screenshots of old conversations that proved the whole scheme. The similarities with my situation were chilling. Emily used the same tactics, the same stories, even the same words to defame her victims. "They're a dangerous duo," Madison explained. "Brandon gives protection and power within the company, while Emily does the dirty work of destroying reputations. Sophia and Tyler were always involved too, helping spread the lies in exchange for favors and promotions." The most shocking revelation came when Madison mentioned that Elizabeth, Brandon's wife, had started to suspect the pattern. She'd noticed the similarities between previous cases and was gathering her own evidence. Madison gave me Elizabeth's contact, suggesting that maybe we could join forces. As I headed back to the motel that night, the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The suspicious promotions of Tyler and Sophia, Nathan's sudden disappearance, the strange comments I occasionally heard in the company hallways. Everything made sense now. Mr. Harrison noticed my agitation when I walked in. I sat at the motel reception counter and shared my findings with him. His advice was straightforward. "Now you have the information. The next step is to use it wisely." He was right. It was time to turn my silence into action. Meeting Elizabeth Thompson took place at a cafe away from the downtown buzz, a place none of the company folks usually went. She was nothing like I expected. Strong, determined, and above all, fed up with Brandon's lies. Her eyes showed the same pain I felt, but also an unwavering drive to expose the truth. Elizabeth had gathered an impressive amount of evidence over the years. Suspicious bank transfer records, compromising emails, conversation recordings. Brandon wasn't as careful at home as he was in the office. She showed a clear pattern. Every time Emily got involved with an employee, a series of slanders followed, and then large sums would be deposited into an offshore account. "It's not just about infidelity," Elizabeth explained as she showed intricate financial spreadsheets. "They use these situations to cover up money being siphoned off from the company. Every scandal is just a smokescreen for bigger fraudulent operations." She was right. The dates of the deposits lined up perfectly with the periods when employees left the company after being defamed. We developed a meticulous plan. Elizabeth would continue gathering internal information, while I maintained my calm at work, documenting every suspicious interaction. We needed someone else inside the company, a person with access to financial documents. That's when I thought of Ashley. Ashley worked in the finance department and had already shown that she didn't buy Emily's lies. When I approached her, she didn't hesitate to help. Her access to the company's internal records would be key to connecting all the evidence we had. Over the next few weeks, our little team worked quietly. Ashley discovered irregularities in projects that Brandon supervised, all matching up with previous scandal periods. Elizabeth managed to record compromising conversations between Brandon and Emily at her own home during the business dinners she organized. The most surreal moment was when Elizabeth found a detailed diary that Emily had forgotten at their house after one of the meetings. In it, Emily coldly described her manipulation strategies, including how she gained people's trust before destroying them. There were specific mentions of how to use Tyler and Sophia to spread rumors, promising them benefits in return. Every new discovery only strengthened our resolve. Elizabeth, who initially planned just on getting a divorce, was now determined to expose the entire scheme. Ashley carefully organized every document, creating a clear timeline of the frauds and manipulations. Our biggest concern was timing. We needed to act before Emily and Brandon noticed that we were connecting the dots. Elizabeth mentioned that the company's annual party was coming up, an event where all the directors and key employees would be present. It would be the perfect moment to lay it all out. Mr. Harrison, who remained my confidant at the motel, warned me about the importance of backing up all our evidence. Following his advice, we created multiple copies, stored in different secure locations. We couldn't risk all our work being lost or destroyed. Every day that passed, our web of evidence grew stronger, and the noose was tightening around Emily and Brandon. They continued their lives as usual, clueless that their own actions had created the weapon that would be used against them. Getting ready for the corporate party required careful planning. Ashley became a key player, providing access to crucial documents that proved the financial misappropriations. Every file uncovered a new layer of the scheme: forged invoices, overpriced contracts, all tied to the dates when employees were defamed and forced out. Meanwhile, Elizabeth managed to get hold of Brandon's personal laptop during one of his business trips. The information found was devastating. Emails detailing how he and Emily planned every move, from the initial approach to destroying victims' reputations. There were also compromising chats with Tyler and Sophia, promising promotions in exchange for their role in spreading rumors. Ashley uncovered a pattern in the financial records that no one had noticed before. Every time an employee was forced out, a series of suspicious transactions occurred in the following days. The money was funneled through several accounts before ending up in a Cayman Islands account under a shell company's name. During this investigation period, I kept up my normal routine at work. It was surreal watching Emily and Brandon carry on as if nothing was wrong, continuing their smear campaign against me. Sophia would come up with more and more elaborate stories about my supposed problematic behavior, while Tyler spread rumors about my emotional instability. Elizabeth suggested that we hire a private investigator to tail Emily and Brandon. The photos and videos gathered left no doubt about their relationship, but more importantly, they captured suspicious meetings with people connected to the shell companies used in the financial scheme. Mr. Harrison helped me organize all the documentation in chronological order. His background in accounting, something he'd never mentioned before, was crucial to understanding some of the more complex transactions. In cases like this, he said, the sequence of revelations is as important as the revelations themselves. Ashley created a digital presentation with all the evidence, protected by passwords and stored on various devices. We even included recorded interviews from ex-employees that Elizabeth managed to track down, all telling eerily similar stories of how they were manipulated and had their careers ruined. A week before the party, we held a final meeting at the motel. Elizabeth, Ashley, and I reviewed every detail of the plan. We had backups of all the evidence in multiple locations, physical copies of the most important documents secured in safes, and a clearly laid out sequence for how to present each piece of information. The most impressive part was discovering how many people in the company had suspected something was wrong, but were too scared to speak up. Ashley had discreetly surveyed a few colleagues in the finance department, finding silent allies who provided even more proof of the irregularities. Elizabeth was especially tense. Besides exposing Brandon's betrayals, she planned to use the evidence in her divorce proceedings. Her lawyer was confident that not only would she get a significant portion of the assets, but she'd also be entitled to compensation for the years of fraud committed with the couple's resources. On the eve of the party, I made one last visit to the office before the big reveal. I watched Emily laughing with Sophia, Brandon busy making plans on his phone in his office, Tyler handing out fake smiles in the hallways. None of them had any idea that their little empire of lies was about to come crashing down. The corporate party started like any other. The hotel ballroom was elegantly decorated, soft background music playing, and groups of employees chatting animatedly with champagne glasses in hand. Emily paced around the room, occasionally pausing to whisper something to Sophia, probably more rumors about me. Brandon gave his usual speech about company values and integrity in business. Elizabeth, seated at the main table, maintained a diplomatic smile while holding her glass. Only I knew that her glass held water, not champagne, because she needed to be completely clear-headed for what was coming. Ashley gave the agreed-upon signal. Every director and key person was in the room. It was time to kick off our exposé. I walked up to the stage during a break in the presentations, grabbed the microphone, and began speaking calmly. Good evening, everyone. Before we continue with the festivities, there's something important that needs to be shared. The tone of my voice instantly silenced the room. I saw Emily's face go pale, while Brandon shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The evidence began displaying on the main screen. Ashley had hacked into the presentation system. First came the emails outlining the systematic slander planning. Next, the financial records revealing the misappropriation of funds. Photos of the secret meetings followed. Then came video testimonials from ex-employees. Tyler tried to interrupt, shouting something about me lying, but he was shut down when we projected his own emails negotiating benefits in exchange for spreading lies. Sophia started to head for the exit, but stopped when she saw her own photo from a secret meeting with Brandon, where she was handed an envelope. Elizabeth stood up and walked over to the stage to join me. Her presence made the silence even deeper. In a firm voice, she began to reveal how she uncovered everything, including the recordings made at her home. Brandon tried to take control of the situation but was cut off when Ashley projected bank statements from the Cayman Islands account. His face turned red as the amounts appeared on the screen, along with documents proving his ties to the shell companies. Realizing she was cornered, Emily tried to create one last victim narrative. But her voice failed her when we started reading excerpts from her own diary, where she coldly detailed her manipulation strategies. The most impactful moment was when Nathan appeared in the room. His physical presence, along with his live testimony about how his life was ruined, was the final straw. Several employees began to speak up, sharing their own observations and suspicions they'd been too scared to voice. The board members present at the party immediately called for an emergency meeting in an adjacent room. Brandon was summoned to explain himself, staggering off as if in a trance. Emily stood frozen, while Sophia and Tyler desperately tried to justify themselves to colleagues who now looked at them with contempt. Elizabeth, still on stage with me, held a folder with copies of all the evidence firmly in hand. Her lawyer, strategically present at the party, was already taking notes. The empire of lies they'd built was crumbling live, right before everyone's eyes. The consequences were immediate and devastating for everyone involved. That very night, the board suspended Brandon from his duties and launched a full audit of the company. Emily was escorted out of the building by security, loudly shouting incoherent accusations that no one believed anymore. The police were called due to the evidence of financial fraud. Brandon spent the night giving statements while investigators began combing through years of corporate records. Elizabeth, with her lawyer, secured a restraining order preventing Brandon from accessing or moving any of the couple's assets. Tyler and Sophia were immediately fired. The evidence of their involvement in the scheme was undeniable. It turned out that they not only spread lies but also helped forge documents and intimidate employees who threatened to expose the truth. In the following days, the story exploded in the local media. The city newspaper published an in-depth piece detailing the scheme, highlighting how Brandon and Emily had systematically destroyed careers while siphoning off millions from the company. Ashley, now promoted to chief auditor, led the team investigating the full extent of the financial damage. Elizabeth filed for divorce, backed by a mountain of evidence. Her lawyer was confident not only would she receive a significant share of the assets, but she'd also be entitled to compensation for the years of fraud committed using the couple's resources. The reaction of the other employees was surprising. Many came to me to share stories of how they had sensed something was wrong, but were too afraid to speak up. Nathan, who chose to stay in town, began rebuilding his career, receiving job offers from companies that recognized the injustice he had suffered. Mr. Harrison, who had followed the entire saga from the beginning, offered his motel as a meeting point for ex-employees who wanted to share their experiences. The place turned into a space of collective healing, where those affected by the scheme could support one another. The audit revealed that the scheme was even larger than we had imagined. Brandon had misappropriated funds from nearly every major project over the last 5 years. Emily wasn't just his romantic accomplice. She actively helped commit the fraud, using her relationships as a smokescreen. The company's legal department filed lawsuits against everyone involved. The evidence was so overwhelming that Brandon's lawyers suggested he make a plea deal, admitting guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence. Confronted with proof of her participation, Emily faced charges of fraud, defamation, and extortion. Ashley was instrumental in reconstructing the company's financial records. Her meticulous work not only exposed the full extent of the fraud, but also helped recover some of the stolen money. She implemented new controls to prevent similar schemes in the future. The impact on the local business community was profound. Other companies began reviewing their internal policies and whistleblower systems, fearing that similar schemes might be happening unnoticed. The story became a case study on how power and manipulation can corrupt an entire organization. A week after the public expose, Emily made one last desperate attempt at manipulation. She sent me an email with documents supposedly compromising details from my past. She claimed to have information that could ruin my career if I didn't withdraw the accusations against her. The documents were obviously fake, a pathetic last-ditch attempt at manipulation. I forwarded everything to Elizabeth and her lawyer, who added attempted blackmail to the growing list of charges against her. Emily failed to realize that each new threat only made our case stronger. Meanwhile, Brandon was facing his own consequences. The police investigation uncovered links to criminal organizations laundering money through the shell companies he had set up. His lawyer dropped the case, citing a conflict of interest, leaving him even more legally vulnerable. Tyler and Sophia tried to negotiate deals with the authorities, offering extra information about the scheme in exchange for immunity. But it was too late. The evidence we had was more than enough, and their belated confessions only confirmed what we already knew. Elizabeth, showing a strength that I deeply admired, used her position and influence to create an assistance fund for employees affected by Brandon's scheme. Her gesture not only helped several people rebuild their careers, but also set an important precedent in the business community. Ashley continued uncovering new branches of the scheme. Every day brought revelations about how Brandon and Emily had manipulated not just people, but also numbers, contracts, and business relationships. The scale of their fraud was even larger than we had initially imagined. Mr. Harrison, who had become a close friend throughout the process, helped me keep things in perspective. Sometimes, he would say, we need to go through the fire to come out stronger. His words turned out to be true. Every new threat from Emily only solidified my position and exposed her manipulative nature even more. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. The final resolution came in a much quieter way than the chaos that had come before. Emily, facing multiple criminal and civil charges, accepted a legal settlement that included financial restitution to the victims and a 10-year ban from holding administrative positions. She moved back to her parents' home in another state, finally disappearing from the lives of everyone she had harmed. Brandon lost everything in his divorce from Elizabeth. The settlement left him with no access to the couple's assets, and the criminal investigations resulted in a significant sentence. His reputation in the corporate world was completely ruined, and the companies that once admired him now used him as an example of what not to do. Tyler and Sophia faced their own consequences. Besides being immediately fired, their professional reputations were permanently tarnished. The story of their involvement in the scheme spread quickly throughout the local business community, making it nearly impossible for them to land positions similar to what they once had. Elizabeth turned the experience into something positive, using her influence to create corporate ethics programs and support systems for victims of workplace harassment. Ashley was promoted to a leadership position within the company, implementing new systems of control and transparency. As for me, I learned that sometimes the biggest betrayals can lead to the greatest transformations. The unexpected support of Mr. Harrison, the alliance with Elizabeth and Ashley, and even the painful experience of losing people I considered close, taught me invaluable lessons about trust, resilience, and justice. The truth, as I discovered, has its own timing. I didn't need to shout to be heard. I just needed to be patient and meticulous, letting the evidence speak for itself. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this.